Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, I am absolutely thrilled about today's topic. We're going to look at ancient Rome, but we aren't talking about the gladiators, the epic battles, or the emperors. No, we're looking at dinner. Specifically, we're going to explore how incredibly strict Roman laws meant to control dinner menus, accidentally sparked scientific innovation, massive black markets, and a literal public health crisis.
Picture this. It's the year 160 BC. You're at a ridiculously lavish Roman dinner party on the Palatine Hill. Wealthy elites are reclining on angled couches, their fingers slick with olive oil and a fermented fish sauce known as garum. Servants are carrying in these heavy bronze platters piled high with roasted meats. But there is a palpable, heavy tension in the room. The host is constantly casting nervous glances toward the heavy wooden doors. And he's not afraid of thieves. He is terrified that the censors, essentially the morality police, are going to burst in and literally weigh the food on the table.
So what's going on here? Well, let's dive into it. The reason that host was sweating bullets was because of the Leges Sumptuariae, or the sumptuary laws. And I want to be really clear right off the bat. These were not modern health and safety codes. These were strict laws designed to regulate exactly how much you spent, who you invited, and precisely what you put in your mouth. The traditionalists in the Roman Senate honestly believed that the, quote, effeminate luxuries flooding in from their conquests in the Hellenistic East were destroying the stoic, rugged Roman soul. So they waged a legislative war on the dinner table, basically trying to force wealthy citizens to eat like humble farmers. Section 1. Hacking the Roman chicken. Our very first bizarre case study in this culinary war starts with poultry. In 1601 BC, a highly specific sumptuary law called the Lex Fania was passed. It explicitly banned the serving of fattened female hens. Why? Well, because while everyday commoners could afford regular birds, the nouveau riche were paying specialized slaves to force-feed hens with sweet wine and bread, creating these grotesque, succulent luxury birds. The Senate absolutely hated this blurring of social hierarchies. But Roman gourmands were clever. They realized the exact wording of the law applied only to female birds. It said absolutely nothing about roosters. Now, to get around the Senate, these gourmands basically invented early agricultural endocrinology. Think about the traits of an intact rooster. It's fueled by testosterone, right? It's highly active, aggressive, and builds dense, tough muscle. If you roast it, it's dry and completely unchewable. But Roman farmers figured out that if you castrate a young rooster, depriving it of androgens, its behavior and its metabolism fundamentally change. It becomes incredibly lethargic. Its body stops building that tough muscle and heavily favors lipogenesis, which is the creation and storage of fat. By castrating the rooster, they invented the capon. It was an extremely tender, heavily marbled bird that was obscenely luxurious, yet perfectly legal.
Section 2. The Dormouse Conundrum.
Okay, this brings us to a, quite frankly, deeply unappetizing rodent that the Romans turned into a highly scientific obsession: the edible dormouse. The Romans didn't just hunt them in the wild, oh no. They cultivated them with ruthless efficiency using a very specific, hacked process. First, they captured the mice and placed them into specialized dark terracotta jars called gliraria. By restricting their movement and plunging them into perpetual darkness, the Romans simulated the onset of winter. This sensory deprivation naturally triggered the animal's hibernation instinct, causing extreme hyperphagia or massive overeating. As the Romans continually dropped walnuts and chestnuts into the jar, the animal just ate and ate and ate.
What actually happens inside that jar is a total marvel of mammalian biochemistry. The dormouse's body takes those high-calorie nuts and rapidly synthesizes two distinct types of fat. White adipose tissue stores the energy, while brown adipose tissue, which is packed with iron-rich mitochondria, is created to generate heat to keep the animal alive during hibernation. By hacking the animal's biology with darkness and a limitless supply of nuts, the dormouse swelled to 3 times its natural size. It basically transformed into a spherical vessel of pure, rich fat and tender muscle.
Well, as you can imagine, the Roman authorities looked at this and were just absolutely appalled. In 115 BC, Consul Marcus Aemilius Scaur passed the Lex Aemilia, explicitly outlawing the serving of dormice altogether. The Senate viewed this unnatural, labor-intensive cultivation of rodents in dark jars as the ultimate symbol of moral decay. I mean, to them, it was an existential threat to the Republic's masculine spirit. How could a society capable of fighting off the Carthaginians spend its time obsessing over stuffed mice? And yet, despite the harsh laws, the underground dormouse trade just completely flourished. The elites simply hid their terracotta jars in the cellar.
Section 3. dark jars and dying fish. So, we're moving from a quest for fat to a much, much darker obsession. 8,000 sesterces. That is the insane price the historian Pliny the Elder recorded for a single, unusually large red mullet sold at auction. To truly grasp how wild that number is, 8,000 sesterces were the equivalent of several years' wages for a highly trained Roman legionary. Emperor Tiberius was so disgusted by the patrician class literally bankrupting themselves over bottom-feeding fish that he actually tried to impose emergency price caps.
And you might be wondering, why on earth pay that much? Well, it brilliantly illustrates something crazy. It wasn't just for the flaky meat. It was for the theatrical spectacle of its death. Roman banquets were a show. A premium live mullet would be brought to the dining room and allowed to suffocate on a silver platter right in front of the guests. The fish's skin contains complex cells called chromators. Over a gripping 5-minute window, as the fish experiences massive physiological stress and lack of oxygen, its central nervous system begins to misfire. At 2 minutes, electrical signals cause the red erythophore cells to flush violently, turning the fish a brilliant red. By 4 minutes, the erythophores shimmer erratically with pink, violet, and white. Finally, at about the 5-minute mark, the nervous system totally collapses, the chromators relax, and the fish fades to a dull gray in death.
Section 4. The extinct wonder plant.
Now we've arrived at the ultimate forbidden flavor, banned not by magistrates, but by human greed and the harsh, unforgiving limits of biology. This was Silphium, the absolute wonder plant of antiquity. The crucial point here is just how incredibly valuable and versatile this plant was. It was a giant fennel that grew only in a tiny 30-mile strip of modern-day Libya. It produced a pungent, umami-rich spice that was perfect for cooking. But it was also a total pharmaceutical juggernaut. It contained a compound called ferrugel, which modern pharmacology shows is a highly effective contraceptive and abortifacient. For a Roman elite obsessed with consequence-free sex but terrified of illegitimate heirs, this natural contraceptive was quite literally worth its weight in silver. In fact, Julius Caesar even stored 1,500 pounds of it right alongside Rome's gold reserves.
But here is the massive botanical tragedy. Because the demand was so astronomically high, the Romans tried to grow it everywhere. But Silphium absolutely refused to be domesticated. Wild plants are incredibly complex. Silphium required highly specific symbiotic relationships with the unique fungi and bacteria in that exact 30-mile strip of North African soil. Stripped of its native ecology, it just wouldn't grow. Despite strict quotas and harvest bans instituted by the state, poachers completely decimated the wild supply. By the middle of the 1st century AD, it was virtually extinct. Pliny the Elder actually wrote that the very last stalk in existence was sent to Rome as a curiosity and presented to Emperor Nero, who reportedly just ate it.
Section 5. The Poison Chalice. All right, this brings us to the really grim, deeply ironic twist of this whole explainer. The sumptuary laws were all about stopping luxuria, the moral decay and the softness of the Roman mind, right? But modern bioarchaeology, looking at skeletons in Pompeii and Herculaneum, shows that their luxury was physically crippling them. The foods they obsessed over, the red meat, the organs of those fattened dormites and capons, the shellfish, and the endless alcohol created a hyper-concentrated purine bomb. Their bodies just couldn't excrete the massive influx of uric acid from these purines, resulting in agonizing gout. The body deposited these sharp, needle-like monosodium urate crystals directly into their joints. Their own status symbols were paralyzing them.
And, this pathology of luxury builds into an even deadlier twist. The Romans didn't have cane sugar, so to sweeten their wines and preserve their fruits, they boiled unfermented grape juice down into a really sweet syrup called sapa. But Roman agronomists explicitly warned cooks to avoid copper or bronze pots because it made the syrup taste bitter. Instead, they demanded the use of lead cauldrons. The acetic acid in the souring grape juice chemically reacted with the walls of the pot, creating lead-2 acetate. They inadvertently, but literally, invented sugar of lead, a highly soluble crystalline solid that tastes incredibly, deceptively sweet.
It's just a staggering historical irony, isn't it? The censors lived in this constant fear of luxuria. They spent their days kicking down doors, terrified that stuffed mice and fattened chickens would destroy the Roman mind. Meanwhile, the true destroyer of the Roman mind was plumbism, or lead poisoning. The elite were legally and freely pouring neurotoxins into their silver goblets every single night. The lead severely inhibited their ALAD enzymes, causing severe anemia, intense paranoia, violent mood swings, and rapid cognitive decline. Section 6. The Endurance of Appetite.
To wrap up our thematic journey here, let's look at the ultimate legacy of these failed laws. Across the board, the Roman sumptuary laws were just a spectacular failure. The state tried to ban fattened hens, and farmers simply bypassed them to invent the capon, which, by the way, remains a staple of high-end French and Italian gastronomy today. They outlawed dormice, resulting in an underground trade of hidden sellers. They kept the price on the cruel spectacle of dying mullets, fueling massive black markets. And when they finally tried to preserve silphium with regulations, human greed pushed it to total extinction. Human ingenuity, and honestly just that deep biological craving for fats, sugars, and umami, completely overpowered the decrees of the greatest empire on earth. Which leaves us with this final kind of profound thought. The Roman authorities truly believed that by strictly controlling what a man put on his plate, they could control his character, his wealth, and his loyalty. They were entirely wrong. Empires rise and fall, magistrates pass decrees, but is human appetite the one true law we can never break?
Please like and subscribe.